Let's bring in now former Speaker of the House, Bronwyn Bishop, and Sky News host, Caleb Bond. Great to see you both. Look, I want to talk about this $1 billion mine that Tanya Plibersek killed off. The Prime Minister seems to be engaging in an acrobatic twist to try spin his way out of Plibersek's decision to kill off the gold mine. Here was Albanese today.
Chris Minns would like it to go ahead. I'd like it to go ahead too. There's nothing to stop it. There were other options that the company put forward on the tailings dam.
Nothing to stop it, only his own government. And even the Chris Minns government is laying the blame squarely on Albanese's team. New South Wales Natural Resources Minister Courtney Houssos met with the mining company Regis Resources today, and she confirmed that the state government had, and I quote, expected the project to go ahead and is disappointed at the federal government's decision to issue a Section 10 declaration. Bronwyn, what is it about Albanese that he tried to spin his way out of the actual fact that his own government has stopped this mine from going ahead at present?
Because he's not very bright. I mean, the bottom line is that this particular project had ticked every box that it needed to do so. It is wrong, to my mind, that the power lies with a single person, the minister, to be able to deny that project going ahead. Now, all that legislation, there's no head of power that allows the minister to do that in the Constitution. And basically they rely on the treaty-making power and some connection to a treaty they've made somewhere along the line that gives her the power to make a regulation to destroy it. And in my mind, that should not be permitted. That is bad lawmaking. So I think there's some fundamental changes needs to be made to the principal legislation that she's overseeing, for starters. And I think that she should be made to literally recant. Because this business of someone whispered something in my ear, and then Albanese says, I'm not stopping the mine. He put the tailing dam somewhere else. And she comes out and says, well, the person who whispered in my ear said that the spirits are now telling me she's glad the mine is closing. I mean, the whole thing is an absolute nonsense and an insult to the average Australian's intellect. Yeah. But that basic legislation needs changing, and Plibersek has to be held up to account. She's tried to save her own seat from an incursion from the Greens and say, look at me, I stopped a mine. Whoop-de-doo.
Politics is behind so much of what we're seeing going on. But Caleb, I want to know, do you think there are other avenues now for Regis Resources to go ahead with this mine? And also, what's your view on that level of spin? I just think it's breathtaking that the Prime Minister can stand up there in front of the media and give an answer that seems to indicate he had nothing to do with this. His own government had nothing to do with this.
Well, the Prime Minister has now made it clear that there is an avenue for this mine to go ahead. Now, whether or not he's spoken to Tanya Plibersek before making that public announcement, I don't know. And to come out and say, look, you know, I support it, as though it weren't a decision of his government to block it. I'm surprised you didn't blame Peter Dutton. That's generally what they have done with everything else that has gone wrong within his government, particularly when it's come to borders and people being let out of immigration detention, etc. But for the decision, that was made by Tanya Plibersek at the last moment was on the basis that there was an Aboriginal heritage problem and therefore the project could not go ahead. The Prime Minister now says, well, there are other places where that dam can go. There is a solution to this problem. That being the case, why did Plibersek, as the minister, not go to the developer and say, look, I have concerns about where you want to do this bit. Why don't we put it over here? Do you have alternatives? The Prime Minister says today that there are alternatives, that Regis has put forward alternatives. Well, why was that not taken into account in the first place? He is walking backward 100 miles an hour because he knows how bad it looks, and in the meantime, Plibersek has refused to front up to the locals and explain her decision. I mean, it's a mess.
You just get the very strong sense that he doesn't know what each of his ministers are doing. He's not across the detail until it's too late. Suddenly there's a crisis and then he says, what's going on here? Let's walk it back. But, you know, you really get the sense that unlike other Prime Ministers, he's just not across the detail in each of the different ministerial portfolios. Now, I spoke last night about the right to disconnect laws that came into effect yesterday. I spoke about how they work against flexible working arrangements, particularly for parents. Now, our regular panellist, Andrew Carswell, has today written an article in The Nightly, and he says the government says these laws are progressive when, in fact, they are a throwback to the bygone era when mobile phones and email didn't exist, when we all punched our time cards into a physical machine. Mutual flexibility is progressive, not rigid rules around 9 to 5, as whined by Dolly Parton, 44 years ago. Bronwyn, I'm not going to ask you to sing that song. I love that song, working 9 to 5. But, surely flexible working arrangements are a two-way street, and employers can't expect to have time off if they're not going to then respond later.
Flexibility and agreement between employer and employee was the fundamental principle that all the reforms about industrial relations were done under the Howard government, that brought in flexibility that allowed particularly women to have hours that could suit them. They come to an agreement.
Yes.
And this concept of 9 to 5 is just antiquated. It belongs in the public service where, if my memory serves me, I think it was actually 9 minutes to 5. It was very precise. So it's an idea that came out of the European Union. This government hasn't got an original thought in its head. It picks it up from somebody else. And it was suddenly picked up and added into that last tranche that Burke forced through, and it came into effect on the 26th of August. There are 7 pages, as Andrew Carswell pointed out, about what is the definition of a reasonable or unreasonable attempt to contact an employee.
It's too confusing for bosses.
So we will have no idea what it means until there's a body of case law.
I mean, what are you going to do? Let me read through those 7 pages to find out if I can send this email with a question because it's 5 minutes past 6, Caleb.
You won't get an answer by reading the 7 pages.
No, that's the problem.
You have to have the Fair Work Commission interpret the 7 pages in order to know that this is what they will decide is a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah.
So there are going to be people who are going to be in no man's land for a long time.
Now, I have a lot of friends who are similar age to me who have children in a lot of different professions, and they work, they go do school pickup, and then they log back on at night when their kids are asleep, especially lawyers, people like that, and they do a lot of work at night. This works against that. These laws are regressive.
Well, it's essentially a solution in search of a problem, right? I mean, this, for the vast majority of people, is not a problem. And if your boss is contacting you incessantly outside of work hours, we have a great job market at the moment. You can pack up and go elsewhere. A boss who operates like that will not keep staff and will not remain in business. It is as simple as that. If you want to work in a job where you're not going to be contacted outside of your normal working hours, well, get a different job. I mean, you and I have worked in journalism our entire working lives, Bronwyn in politics, right? And they're jobs where you're going to be contacted at all hours. I know that the Chief of Staff might call me at 8 p.m. and ask me a question on deadline before the paper goes out. Well, that's just part of the deal. I was on cadet wages, for heaven's sake, and I could deal with that.
But Caleb, that's not even after hours for you now. After hours would have to be 1 in the morning, off air at 11 p.m.
If you're a trade union leader, you can ring up any time.
Is there a carve-out?
Oh, they will be able to ring up an employer and say, you get out there and on strike.
Oh, of course.
Yes.
All right. Bronwyn Bishop, Caleb Bond, thank you both so much.
Please.